Okay.
How are you doing, Mr. Miller?
I'm good, Jerome. How are you?
And I am great. I've been here for 24 hours and experienced this beautiful space that you guys have in the middle of like an hour away from a city center.
Yeah.
How did you guys manage to preserve this?
Well, this is a separate farm from our main farm, which adjoins it. And in the 70s, there was an old man who was farming this farm. His family came. He came from Australia in the 30s, and he bought this farm. I'm not sure when, and it's a small farm. It's about 600 hectares. And this old gentleman, Mr. Doyle, bought the farm, and he farmed it until he was 96. And at that time, his family, who also his children settled, and they had children and so on. They farmed further up north, Zambia side, and they eventually decided they wanted to sell this farm. So the old man sold this farm because we were the neighbours. We bought it. The farm is not a good agricultural. It's not a good arable farm because it's very, very rocky. There's a lot of limestone on the surface. So there's very limited areas where you can actually clear the trees and plant crops. Although a certain amount of the farm had been cleared and had been planted to crops in the old days with Mr. Doyle. And the old house here is called Springvale because there was a very prominent spring that gushed out of the ground just here. And I think it was before Mr. Doyle's time. One of the previous owners dug a furrow, and they used to irrigate wheat with flood irrigation way back in the 30s. So, anyway, we bought the farm and decided to just use it for grazing cattle, mainly, although we had one field of maize that we planted about 55 years ago. It was the last time we had a field planted with maize here. And that's now been overgrown by the regrowth. Generally, the farm was probably 60% original bush, and we're quite lucky in that half of the farm is rationale woodland, or what's called miombo, and the other half is thorn woodland, savanna woodland. So we have the two sides, and it's quite nice for the. We decided in the late 80s, the Kaunda government allowed us to start buying wildlife and stocking them on fence farms. Up till then, nobody you couldn't keep an animal and own it. It was owned by the state. But Kaunda changed the rules, and we were allowed to stock our farms if we had a proper fence and start game farming, which we were all keen to do because there's a lot of game in Zambia, but we all felt it would be nice to have game farms. And we're close to town. We decided to build a small lodge and have visiting guests, and part of the whole experience is it's a wild area. Although now in those days there weren't so many houses nearby. Now we're almost completely surrounded.
Yeah. So
we're a little isolated place, and we've tried to keep. We're keeping as many trees as we can, and I've always spent a lot of time in the bush, and you drive past thousands of trees, and until 30 years ago I didn't know the names of any indigenous trees. So I felt I wanted to start learning, so I just started getting some books and trying to learn the names of trees. We use scientific names because one of the problems with vernacular names or English names or whatever is that in one country they'll call it a different name to another country, and so you can call a tree a name, and then somebody else knows it as a completely different tree. So we name. I started boning up. I'm a civil engineer. I'm not I'm not a botanist or a farmer or anything. So I just wanted to learn the names of the trees and learn which they are. And so over the years I started understanding trees a bit better. And I keep having to read the books because I forget the name. But anyway, the opportunity came along when I heard that with Nico, who is a botanist, Nico Whiteman's a botanist. He was his family were here, and then he was actually brought up in Canada and went to Canadian University. Anyway, he came back to live here, and he was working with Mike Bingham, who was a very famous tree specialist in Zambia, a tree expert. And Mike, he was a cantankerous guy. I remember asking him once what a tree was, and he said, "Well, don't you know what that tree is?" And I said, "No, that's why I'm asking you." So he was fairly intolerant. Oh, Mike. Anyway, Nico, I think he probably told you, but he was more interested in the small plants that like orchids and things like that, and the small flowering plants and so on. And he does a lot of that, and he grows them and sells them to people. But being a botanist, I met, because he asked if he could come and look at what we've got here, and so, and I heard about it, and so I met up with him, and I said, well, I've always wanted to do a tree marking exercise and find out how many trees we can find here. So him and I started doing drives and walks and so on, and rather than try and print a name of a tree and then put it on the tree, I thought we'll just have a number and we'll geo-reference it so that it's so easy to do that. And then I bought a whole lot of aluminium numbers from Amazon over in the UK, but I could only get up to 100. So we started off with green, and so we got up to 100, and then I bought red and put those up, but the red faded very quickly, so then I went to blue, and the blues don't fade too badly. Now I've finally located some aluminium stamp numbers, so you've got an aluminium label, and I've got up to, I think it's 400, which I'm going to gradually replace the one we've got, so that we've got a more long-lasting, because they do fade in the sun, those coloured ones eventually. And they've got a number written on them, like printed on them, which also can tend to fade. So if you've got a punched out number, I think it'll last longer. Anyway, I was quite excited because I didn't have any idea how many we might find, and so far we found around about 150 different trees. And to me that's fairly fascinating. I think it depends what you're used to, but I know in a lot of places they have a lot less trees. And I know we have thousands of trees in Africa generally, but just to find 150, and that doesn't include all the smaller shrubs. We try and limit to trees. And obviously there's hundreds of other species of plants that occur. We're quite heavily stocked with game here, and one of the problems is that the browsers, which is our kudu and our eland, mainly those two, tend to eat a lot of young trees. So they browse, and some of the trees which are common on the farm, even though we've got cattle on the farm, you don't find them here because they've been eaten out completely by the eland. We found one new tree it was only a small one, but we thought it might be a tree that we expected to find, and we hadn't found one, and it had a flower, and I was quite excited. And I got hold of Nico to show it to him, and when I got back to it, it had been eaten by an eland. There was only a little stump left. But that's what happened.
So, conservation, what was your first introduction into the conservation space? And I know you said you got a controversial answer, but I don't think it's controversial. I'm from Zimbabwe.
Okay.
So my uncles are in the same world. I grew up going hunting.
Okay.
So I do understand exactly where you're coming from. And yes, it does cause a little bit of controversy in some spaces. But you said something about if the animal has a price tag on it, then you protect it.
Well, yeah, I mean, on this place here, we stocked in 89, and we probably reached capacity of what we can hold in an area this size. within 5 years we were up to capacity. So that meant we had to get rid of a lot of animals. Otherwise the animals eat all their habitat, and then the habitat disappears and the animals starve. I mean, it happened very quickly.
Yeah.
And we have to last through long dry seasons. And so you've got to be careful. And, you know, like the carrying capacity of the land, if you have cattle, is probably one animal per 5 hectares to reliably keep cattle on a place like this. So I try and work on one livestock unit equivalent per hectare, which is equivalent of 100 head of cattle, and that works out of the mix we've got of roughly 300 head of game. But now your 300 head of game, you know, you have quite a lot of females, so you actually have to get rid of 30% every year. If you don't get rid of 30%, you become overstocked. Now there are 2 ways of getting rid of them. Is one is selling it to other game farmers. Yeah. So we dart and we capture live, and we do a lot of that. And like last year, I sold 140 head, 44 head of different game to different buyers. The capture teams come in and they either dart them or chase them with a helicopter into a boma, and then they put them in a truck and move them on. Well, that's a great way of doing it, but we also have to cull animals. I mean, especially you get large numbers of males. Our males tend to fight because it's a smaller area. They can get at each other, and so a lot of the herd males will kill all his offspring if he can. He just keeps chasing them, and eventually he spears them with his horns, and that's the end of that. Some species don't do it. The kudu very seldom do that, but a lot of the species do it all the time. Even impala kill each other. Bushbuck are pretty tolerant. They don't often kill each other. Impala are bad. Roan are bad. Eland are okay. Sable can be bad. So yeah, it's a matter of you have to keep your male numbers down, and we tend to shoot those and either sell them for meat, although I don't do that very much, but we put them through the kitchen so that people can eat venison. Or, yeah.
I had the burger yesterday, so.
But fundamentally, you can't say, right, we're only going to keep these animals for live sales, because ultimately everybody needs to have a use for that animal, and the main usage is the meat. Yeah. And there's a huge demand. I mean, there's been various studies, and they think that up to 3,000 head of buffalo equivalent come out of the bushes as poached game meat every year, just from the Kafui side. So there's a huge market for meat, and if private game ranchers can help supply the meat market, you know, because these guys who hunt them in the parks and in the GMA around the park, they have a pretty tough time, and you know, I mean, you find them with these like panniers of dried game meat on each side of a bicycle, and they push these bicycles for 100 kilometers through the bush to get to where they're marketing it to somebody who probably makes all the money in one of the towns near the parks, you know. And then they send it in illegally into town. And, yeah, so it's a big problem. I've always been a hunter. I like to hunt. I like to eat what I shoot. So, and you know, if say tomorrow the government says, right, you can't eat your game meat on your game farm anymore, I would have to sell them all, because there would be no point in keeping it. Yeah. You know, so basically our reserve of 300, and we actually supply back to national parks at times. That would be gone. No game farmer. You know, everybody would say, all right, okay, we'll go back to cattle. So,
that's a big loss.
And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that. And for the biodiversity, and you know, if you want to keep cattle, you're better off, you know, having smaller paddocks and chopping the trees down and planting grass and so on. So all of the benefits you get from the biodiversity here would also go, because, you know, it's just the reality of it. You cannot keep the animals unless the meat has value.
I mean,
and I don't understand people who say you mustn't do it, because the same people live with people who eat chickens and so on, and pigs and so on, that are kept in the most horrific conditions. Our animals, one minute they're completely wild, and the next minute they've been shot through the head. They don't even know they've been shot, and it's, to me, it's the kindest thing. I mean, and rather than carrying it to an abattoir and then sending it through to put electric shocks through its head or whatever.
You see, but this is I think these are some of the conversations that we need to have in a lot of these spaces. Like conservation is, we have a lot of green, kind of, save the world. But understanding of balance is not there as well, and what the balance may look like. And then again, you have people that will talk about what they're doing in Kenya, and then they'll look at, and I'm like, well, you can't compare countries. Again, it doesn't make
Kenya
sense.
banned hunting years ago, and I don't think it's all a successful thing at all. But here you've got a huge problem, because we've got very large areas which have the indigenous people live in villages there, and they live with the animals, and most of their income relates to hunting.
Yeah.
And they have been furious at times when, for whatever reason, the hunting concession has been stopped for a year or two or more.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely furious. They say, well, no, we're inconvenienced by these animals, and we have to, we get charged by elephants and buffalo and all sorts, and yet there's no benefit to us.
Yeah.
Whereas if the hunters are there, every animal that's shot,
yeah.
almost, well, not all of them, but like 85-90% of those animals are delivered to the villages so that they can consume them, so they get all their protein like that.
Thank you.
And it's a way of, it's also, it's a way of life for them to eat. And for example, they say, oh, you mustn't have lion hunting. Well, in that case, if you can't have the benefit of the large amount of money that gets generated by lion and leopard hunting, the people will have to protect themselves, and they'll poison them. So you'll lose all your lions because they'll be poisoned. And the people who say don't hunt lions just don't understand the danger that they're going to do to the world.
A lot of the people, like there was that big uproar to do with the elephants in Livingstone and Botswana and stuff, and a lot of the people who are talking about this and have a problem with people culling elephants don't live with elephants.
No,
they don't have the problem.
None of them do.
For them an elephant's a fluffy little toy.
You can't anthropologize animals either. Animals are animals, and we're humans. It's a difference from that.
And I think that's also one of those things where, until you're faced with something that's at your front door, a lot of these people now that are experiencing climate situations, even in the West, are kind of going, okay, so this can affect us. But again, because culling is so far away, it's not happening on their doorstep, it's easy for them to, go and parade about these things. But when you haven't lost a relative, to a lion or to an elephant,
Right.
so it's easy for you to kind of throw your hands up and be like, oh, that's wrong. So...
Well, it's the same argument with fox hunting and all that sort of thing.
I mean, coming out here, and I was saying to Tosca, I didn't feel like I was coming to a tourist attraction. I felt like I was coming to a place that is preserving, a lot. I don't know, and I was like, I don't know how intentional that was. I mean, talking to you now, I can see where it's come from. But it feels like it feels like the Garden of Eden to a certain extent, because we went for a walk with my sons there around, and the amount of wildlife that they got to see, and they're just fascinated by all of this growth, and it's a beautiful space. Did you ever envision it this way?
No, we hoped it would become the one thing that I'm very happy about, and I suppose a bit surprised about, is that I think most of our business is local, local people.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people can come here and they can have a meal and they can go for a game drive, and they wouldn't be able to afford to go to a national park to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But they're getting a wild, a semi-wild, almost wild, well, it is wild, the animals are wild, experience which is affordable and on their doorstep. So this sort of thing should be encouraged.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
It's amazing to hear, as I said, because we always get one side of the story, and a hunter's perspective, a conservationist perspective, person who's lived, grown up, and loved this land to the extent where they're willing to walk around and tag trees so that more people can understand it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Jerome. Thanks for talking to me. Now I hope I can get a cup of coffee. Cappuccino, please.